Chapter 15. Rose had collected her maid from the foyer of Burlington House, where Mary had been happily flirting with the footman. "I beg your pardon, miss. I should have been more attentive to you." Mary was stammering, hurrying along in Rose's wake, mistaking her haste for anger. Rose stopped abruptly. "No pardon is needed, Mary, I can assure you. I am certainly not angry with you. Whatever gave you that impression?" "You're very quiet, Miss Rose, and going as fast as your skirts will allow. Besides, the pinched look about your mouth makes me think you weren't in the best humour." Rose had to laugh over her maid's words. "I apologize, Mary, if I was going too fast. I have a task ahead of me that I am not at all looking forward to, and I would like it to be over and done with. But that very same task requires some planning, and I am worried about it. Thus my quietness, and perhaps a pinched look that I did not realize I was sporting. Thank you for reminding me that my feelings write themselves upon my face. I really must make a greater effort at being stoic." Now Mary laughed. "Oh, no, miss. You certainly do not owe me any apologies, to be sure. What has you so troubled? Is there anything I can do to help you with? Does it have anything to do with the Duke, miss?" "Yes and no, Mary. I do not think there is anything you can do to help me with this one. The Duke and I agreed that this is a far greater problem than the two of us can handle on our own, and now is the time to apprise my father of the situation. I fear you will be assigned to help me pack my bags when my parents ship me back to the estate in disgrace over my association with Rentham." Rose could not even bring herself to say his name at this point, as all her tumultuous feelings came back to the fore, and she remembered the brief kiss they shared before she smacked his face. Hoping her face was not once more displaying her confused feelings, she shoved the thoughts to the back of her mind to be mulled over later. Now she had to concentrate on what to tell her father. She was relieved that they were nearly home. "I cannot say I am sorry that you will be telling his lordship about this mess, miss. I have not been easy with you traipsing around with the Duke of Rentham, messing with the likes of Sir Jason Broderick. Much better it is for Lord Smythe to be involved." "You are quite correct, Mary. Now we had best hurry along. My mother mentioned that Papa is to leave for Paris. I dearly hope I have not missed him." "But surely you would not depart without saying farewell to you?" Mary protested. "My father is far too busy to be concerned about such things, Mary." "Yes, of course, miss. Let's hurry along, then," Mary agreed simply, lifting her skirts in order to be able to keep up with the long-legged strides of her mistress. Endeavouring for decorum, Rose refrained from taking the stairs two at a time, and took a deep breath before opening the door to their home. "Has my father left yet, Walter?" she asked as the butler was helping her with her coat. "No, miss. He is in his study. He is getting everything ready for an early morning departure for Paris, miss. He asked that he not be disturbed, as he has so many things that need to be done before he leaves." "Thank you, Walter. I will try my best not to take too much of his time, but I really do need to speak with him on a matter of some urgency." Rose would not be deterred, despite the sinking feeling in her nervous stomach. Feeling as though birds had joined the butterflies fluttering in her stomach, Rose tried to ignore her shaking limbs as she made her way to her father's study. Taking another deep, steadying breath before she knocked, Rose waited to hear her father's summons. "Enter," Lord Smythe called distractedly. "Good morning, Papa. I hope I am not disturbing you too terribly. Walter mentioned that you asked not to be disturbed, but if you have a couple of minutes, I need to speak to you about an urgent matter." Lord Smythe looked at his daughter in surprise. Her tone must have conveyed the pent-up anxiety she was feeling, even though she had striven for an air of light inquiry. Putting down his pen, the Baron rose from his chair and came around his desk to grab his daughter's hand. "I know I am often preoccupied, my dear, but I will never be too busy for you. Please, have a seat here beside me and tell me what concerns you." He seated her in one of the two chairs situated in front of his desk, and he perched himself on the edge of the other one, keeping her cold hand in his as his worry mounted over the look in his daughter's eyes. "You are making me nervous, my dear. Will I have need of my brace of pistols?" he asked, hoping to lighten the mood. "I dearly hope not," Rose replied with a shaky laugh. Now that her father was near and willing to take on her burdens, she felt an overwhelming urge to throw herself in his arms and cry. Bracing her backbone and reminding herself she was a fully competent woman, Rose lifted her chin proudly, took another deep, fortifying breath, and then launched into speech. "It is about Broderick, Papa. I fear the scoundrel is up to no good, and he has designs on the government." The Baron looked at his daughter with amazement. "Whatever do you mean, my dear?" "Remember I told you that I have seen him about a little this season? A new friend of mine, I am not sure if you know her, Lady Yorkley, warned me away from him." "She is a good, sensible woman in that case." "Yes, she does seem to be. She told me that he wishes to gain control over the Prince Regent. I do not know exactly what he is about, but I thought that you should know since you are leaving town. I am not sure if he means to attend the Congress in Paris or if he will remain here, but you know so much more about these things than I do. I did not feel that this was a matter that I could look after any longer." Lord Smythe was looking at his daughter with puzzlement clearly written upon his features. "I feel as though I have missed something in your explanation, my dear. I pray your forgiveness for being daft, but none of this is anything new. The knight has been a scoundrel for years. It is a wonder he is accepted in polite society, but there is so rarely proof of his schemes. But, proof or not, we have always known of his designs upon poor Prinny and his aspirations to control the government. Why does this have you in such fidgets at this time?" Rose had so wished she did not have to go into any more details, but she realized now that was a futile dream. She took another deep breath and pushed on with her explanations. "I overheard him one night at a musicale I was attending, scheming with someone." Lord Smythe gazed at his daughter, clearly expecting more details. Rose could feel heat rising in her cheeks and made herself plod on with her story. "He was speaking with Lord Austen. As far as I can tell, the man is a dunce and needs to make better choices in his companionship, but he is fairly innocent when it comes to conspiring against the government. He is just another pawn for Broderick to use. But it was very obvious to me that they were up to no good." "When was this, my dear?" Lord Smythe prodded. "And why did you decide to do the investigating on your own, without keeping me informed of these developments immediately? I still feel as though you were trying to withhold some pertinent details." Rose realized it could be avoided no longer, so she blurted out the full facts. The two of them were plotting to entrap the Duke of Wrentham into a marriage alliance with Lord Austen's daughter, Lady Anne. I did not want to tell you right away because I feared you would dismiss my concerns about his schemes due to Wrentham's involvement. I was hoping to discern if there was truly a threat to anyone other than the Duke himself before I came to you with this." There was a heavy silence for several heartbeats, while Lord Smythe regarded his daughter steadily. "I see," he finally said heavily. "And how did you come to the conclusion that there is a greater threat?" he asked, ignoring the truth that his daughter had skirted, that he did not care a fig for any threat against Wrentham. "I spoke with Lady Anne, and realized that they had targeted Wrentham for reasons other than his wealth and title." "Some would probably consider the cur to be handsome," the Baron replied dully. "True, but that still does not seem to be the situation here, Papa. I truly feel as though this threat is not about Alex." Seeing her father's reaction to the use of the Duke's name, Rose hastened to cover her verbal tracks. "It would seem that Wrentham is taking his responsibilities seriously, and has gotten involved in the House of Lords. Lady Anne says he is well connected. When I pried a bit deeper into her words, I believe that, although she thinks this has to do with how many relatives he has, it was a term her father used. You and I both know that the Wrenthams are not an overly large family, so this must be tied in with the activities he's been engaging in politically. Lord Austen does not care about such things, so it can only be Broderick up to no good." "And what do you propose I do about it? You were quite correct when you surmised that I would not give a fig for any threat toward Wrentham," Lord Smythe reminded his daughter testily. "But that is just the thing, Papa. I do not believe the threat is really about the Duke or even his wealth. I think Broderick merely sees him as a means to an end, a tool, as it were, a means of getting to the Prince and influencing the workings of our government." The Baron eyed his daughter askance. "Are you aware that I need to be leaving at first light for very important negotiations in Paris?" "Yes, Papa. That is why I felt the urgency to tell you now, before you leave. I did not know what else to do. I do not trust anyone else's discretion, knowledge, or intelligence, Papa. I needed your advice before you left. Do you think this is a serious threat, or am I full of feathers?" The Baron smiled over his daughter's choice of words, and scrubbed his hand over his face as he thought about all the complications she had just thrown in his lap. Sighing heavily, he finally replied, "You did the right thing, daughter dear. I know this could not have been easy for you. You are right in thinking Broderick is a threat. He pretty much always is. Have you told anyone else about this?" Rose started slightly at his question and tried to hide her guilty blush. She so did not want to tell her father about her meetings with the Duke. She attempted to sidestep the question with half-truths. "I enlisted my friend Lady Elizabeth to help me in making contact with Lady Anne. Elizabeth is an Earl's daughter and made her debut last year, so she is far more socially connected than I am. She was able to perform the introductions and help me tactfully question the other girl. I also spoke with Lady Yorkley, but I did not tell her why I wanted to know about Sir Broderick. I told her that my mother thought he would be a good match for me, and I needed something to tell her to put her off. That wasn't untrue, but I did not think I ought to confide the true motivation behind my questions. I am accustomed to only telling you things, Papa. It has been troublesome to try to work this out without your help." "Now we are getting to the crux of the matter, are we not, Rosamond? Why did you not come to me with this straight away? There is really very little I can do with just one night. Have you thought of the problems that could ensue if Broderick does not come to Paris? How can we set up safeguards so quickly?" Rose hung her head dejectedly at her father's series of questions. "I am truly sorry, Papa. I thought for sure there would be proper safeguards in place, even without a specific threat, and that once you were apprised of the situation you would know just who to tell, and it would be all right and tight. I held on to my silence before now because I worried that you would be glad of a threat upon Wrentham, and would not look beyond it to the potential larger danger. I wanted to see if I could find out whether it was just to the Duke, or if there was something more afoot." "So you did not trust me?" her father asked quietly, searching her face for her true feelings. "Of course I trust you," Rose insisted hotly. "There is no one on earth that I trust more than you. I just was unsure if you could have unclouded judgment when it comes to Wrentham. I truly am sorry, Papa. I should not have questioned your ability to be open-minded." "No, you shouldn't have. But I am man enough to admit that there is merit to your fears. If you had not done some digging, I might have been disposed to dismiss the possibility just because I do not care for the Duke, or the knight. But now something must be done. I shall make a few inquiries and send some messages to the proper quarters. It is good that you are not planning to accompany me to Paris. Now you can stay here and keep your eyes open for Broderick, if he stays in town. I shall have some protocol set up for you to follow before I leave." Impulsively, Rose leaned forward and threw her arms around her father's neck, giving him a squeeze, and placing a brief kiss upon his cheek before pulling back sheepishly. "Thank you so much, Papa. I am truly sorry for adding to your burdens, but I am so relieved to be able to share it with you." "Any time, my darling daughter. Please know that you can come to me any time. But for the moment you really must run along and leave me to sort through a few things. I will be sure to reserve a few moments to discuss whatever is necessary before I leave." Rose bounded up from her chair and hurried to leave her father in peace. She ran up to her room, not bothering for decorum, taking the stairs 2 at a time. She reasoned that inside, where no one but family and the servants could see, it would do nothing to sully her reputation. With a grin, she tripped into her room and sprawled onto her bed. "I am uncertain if you look as though things went well or not," Mary mused from the other side of the room, where she had herself immersed in Rose's wardrobe, where she was searching for anything that needed mending. "It went marvellously well, Mary. I should never have questioned otherwise. I have the most wonderful papa in the world. I didn't even have to tell him about speaking with Wrentham," she declared happily, as she lifted her head to smile at the maid. "I'm not so sure that you should have gotten away with it so freely. I worry this will embolden you to continue with such scandalous behaviour." "Oh, Mary, you fret too much. I can assure you I will not be meeting with the Duke any more. This problem has been handed over to those more equipped to handle it, and my days of clandestine behaviour are over. For now, anyway," she added as an afterthought. "Now I shall be free to apply my mind to deciding on a suitable groom for myself." She smiled cheekily at the maid before asking, "Speaking of that, were you able to give the matter any thought, or have you been as preoccupied as me with other matters?" "I did, as a matter of fact, miss," Mary began, but then they were interrupted by a knock on the door. Mary hurried over to see who was there. A footman was standing there with a message. "A gentleman is here to see you, Miss Rose. He wishes to take you for a ride in the park." "A gentleman?" Rose repeated. "Does this gentleman have a name, Gregory?" Blushing to his roots, the young servant answered. "Yes, miss. Walter says as it is Lord Wesley Dunbar here to see you, miss. What should I tell him, miss? Are you welcoming a ride with Lord Dunbar, or should Walter tell him you were not at home to visitors this afternoon?" The young Gregory needn't have finished his questions, as Rose was already off the bed and next to Mary, pawing through her gowns to find suitable attire for a ride in the park. Running over to the window and looking down, she let out a little squeal when she saw the conveyance that surely belonged to the Viscount standing in the street. "Oh, Mary, he brought a high-perched phaeton. I shall be the envy of all the ladies this afternoon," she declared with glee while glancing at the clock with a frown. "Although it does seem rather early for a fashionable ride around Hyde Park. Mayhap his lordship plans to go elsewhere, and that is why we need to have an earlier start." Now Rose thought of another thing, and she turned wide eyes upon her maid. "Do you think it's acceptable for me to go out for a drive with the Viscount right now? What if my father needs to speak with me? Has the footman left? Perhaps we should have him take a message to Lord Smythe and see what he has to say about my going out for a little while." The footman was still waiting. In her excitement, Rose had failed to properly answer the poor lad. He was standing waiting for her reply. It did not take long for a reply to come back. "Your father says you ought to carry on about your business and enjoy your afternoon. He will not have much to tell you before this evening, or maybe not even until early in the morning before he leaves." It was the answer she had been hoping for. She was already half changed into a pretty gown of sprigged muslin that perfectly matched the darling parasol she had recently purchased to keep the still warm, late autumn sun off her face. "I shall need a spencer too, Mary. The sun might be warm right now, but in a carriage such as a phaeton, I am sure to catch my death from the breeze if I am not careful to cover myself up." Before too many moments had passed, she was ready to descend to greet the gentleman caller. Lord Dunbar was pacing in the Smythes' front receiving-room, hoping earnestly the young lady was not going to keep him waiting for too many moments longer. The suspense was eating at him, and he was anxious to be on the way. He heard a commotion in the foyer, and turned to look toward the door to see what was going on. His mouth opened on a quiet gasp of surprise. "Miss Rosamond, you do look ravishing this afternoon. I shall surely be the envy of all the gentlemen we encounter this afternoon," he complimented. Rose blushed prettily at his compliments, but maintained her composure sufficiently to ask primly, "And where might we be going, my lord? I thought it a little odd for you to be calling round at this hour." "Can a gentleman not just be that anxious to see you?" Rose's tinkle of laughter filled the air between them. "Now, that is a bouncer if ever I heard one, my lord." Wesley could not resist the twinkle in her eyes as she gazed at him merrily. He fully understood why his friend the Duke was so tied up in a knot over this young lady. He sincerely hoped Wrentham would be able to straighten out all the complicated twists and turns their lives had taken of late. He hastened to answer her reply. "'Tis not a bouncer at all, miss, I can assure you. I was most anxious to set my horses to their paces today, and I thought it would be lovely to see if you would like to join me. I hope I have not inconvenienced you by arriving a trifle earlier than is the fashionable norm, but I thought we would have all the more opportunity for conversation if the park is not overcrowded." He concluded his statement with a look of significance, and Rose returned his gaze with her own eyes wide and focused. With her mouth agape in the shape of a silent O, Rose nodded slightly. Recovering swiftly, she pulled on the gloves she had been holding and neared the Viscount to grab his arm. "Now would be a lovely time for a ride in the park, and I am completely ready to go. We ought not to keep your horses waiting much longer, should we, my lord? If you are ready, we could be on our way." Wesley laughed over her turning of the tables on him, and allowed her to usher him from the room. Before many moments had passed, they were high up in his phaeton, making their way swiftly toward the park. The traffic was thin, and they were able to get to a rapid speed. He was glad she did not squeal at the pace, but he was forced to control his amusement as she grabbed onto the seat with both hands. "Your team seems to be wonderfully matched," she said with as much composure as she could muster. Wesley laughed again. You are a downy one, miss. Most young ladies would be demanding to be put down at the nearest corner if I were to drive like this with them in my phaeton." Rose managed to keep an innocent look upon her face as she gazed steadily at the Viscount. "Whatever do you mean, my lord? Surely you would never try to intentionally put me to the blush, would you, my lord?" Wesley had brought the phaeton down to a slower pace by this point, and was able to look into her dancing eyes as she had made this sally. "No, miss, I would never do such a thing," he drawled sarcastically. Rose batted her eyelashes at him in response, and Wesley barked with another laugh. "You are a complete hand, miss." Wesley applied himself to pulling his matched bays through the entrance of the park, and letting them take a sedate pace as they meandered along the well-travelled lanes. After a few moments of silence, Rose turned to Wesley. He enjoyed seeing her eyes dancing with merriment once more. "So, my lord, I am waiting on tenterhooks to know what we shall be conversing about. You did hint rather heavily that you had something to discuss with me, did you not?" Wesley smiled as he answered, "I admire your forbearance, Miss Rose. I am impressed that you managed to hold on to your silence for this long. Most ladies would have been badgering me long before we made into the park." "Really, my lord," she countered, "I would think most ladies would have been too busy yelping at you to slow down, and all thoughts of any conversation with you would have fled from their minds, swept away with the wind created as your horses galloped through the streets of London." "Now you are exaggerating," Wesley chided. "Not by much, my lord. But never mind about that. I am not most ladies. But I do find that I am growing impatient over your teasing. Did you have something you wished to discuss with me or not?" "As a matter of fact, I did," Wesley teased, but then quickly launched into his explanation as he saw that his companion was about to lose all semblance of patience. "I actually bear a message from Wrentham." "The Duke? Is everything all right with him?" Rose's dismay was evident in her tone. "All is well. He is just concerned over something that occurred this morning while you two met." Rose blushed over this reminder of a questionable conduct, as well as her memories of the sweet kiss they had exchanged that morning. Her eyes flew to meet those of the Viscount as she wondered frantically if Alex would have told his friend about that. Struggling to maintain her composure, Rose asked in as neutral a tone as she could muster, "What is he concerned about, my lord? Did he tell you all about it?" "He did, in fact, and he wanted me to pass the information on. It only came to his attention after you had already left, so he could not tell you himself, and, of course, he cannot simply call upon you for a myriad of reasons." "Of course," Rose replied a little faintly, as she realized it was not what she had feared. Her relief was short-lived. "The Duke has reason to believe that your meeting was witnessed. He does not think you were overheard, but he does believe someone was watching the two of you together. He had very little information when I was speaking with him earlier today, but he did want you to know as soon as possible so you could be on your guard. He fears you may not be perfectly safe." "His Grace worries like an old governess. What could there possibly be to threaten my safety even if we were observed?" Rose demanded in counter-argument. "'Tis true that my reputation could be in tatters were it to become known that I have met with the Duke at Burlington House, but since it is a venue open to the public, and I had my maid in tow, there is very little that could come of anyone speaking of it." "It was actually not your reputation which concerned him, although, of course, as a gentleman he would want to ensure that no scandal were to be attached to you. But rather, he is concerned that the man watching you could have been a follower of Broderick, and that dastardly fellow could now view you as a threat to his plans, in which case you could be in serious danger indeed." Rose remained silent as she absorbed Lord Dunbar's words and all the possible ramifications. "I now understand the Duke's concerns," she finally mustered, before quickly rallying with a shrug. "Even if Broderick were to figure out that we were onto his schemes, I am most certain he would not think to threaten me. I have already passed all my concerns about Broderick on to my father, and it is out of my hands. I am no threat to Broderick on my own. Surely he will not trouble himself with a mere slip of a girl." Wesley once again threw back his head and laughed. "If he knows what kind of a girl this particular slip is, he will be very troubled, miss. But perhaps you are right, and there is no danger. However, Rantham was most insistent that you be told that it is a real possibility. He was trying to find out more information, but he wanted you to know as soon as possible. I would suggest it is best if you do not arrange any more clandestine meetings, but instead try to speak in a crowded ballroom, where you will be sure to be fully safe. Surely you realize that I cannot be seen speaking to him. We are sworn enemies. You cannot be serious, Wesley declared with chagrin. You have spent much of the past 2 weeks in each other's company, working to solve a common problem. That does not sound like the behavior of sworn enemies. Be that as it may, we are, or rather our families are, which is pretty much the same thing. We cannot be seen to be speaking. Our parents would have apoplexy. This is the daftest situation I have ever heard of. You should all be sharing your grief, not blaming each other for it. Wesley's words made Rose realize he would never understand. You do not know what you are talking about, my lord. Rose dismissed his comments and tried to turn the subject. Anyhow, you have fulfilled your duty and passed me the Duke's message. I will be on my best behaviour and do my utmost to be on guard, lest the devilish knight should be after me. I beg of you, Miss Rose, do not make light of this. You really could be in danger. Mayhap you are right, my lord, but my father is now aware of the situation. He will come up with a solution before Broderick can do any of the nefarious things he might have planned. But did you not say that your father is leaving on the morrow for Paris? If he is not here, how will you be protected if Broderick does not follow him to Paris, or if he sets some sort of action against you? Rose could see that the Viscount really was quite serious and was concerned for her safety. A niggle of doubt crept into her consciousness. She really ought to take offence at the man for doubting her ability to take care of herself, but his concern for her was endearing, in an overbearing sort of way. She made an effort to be conciliatory. Have no fear, my lord. I assure you I will be careful, and I promise to call on your help should the need arise. Seeing that he still looked uneasy, Rose shrugged. There is not much else I can do, my lord. My father has promised to look into the situation, and I am quite certain he will not leave me here in danger, or unprotected. I appreciate your concern over me, but I really do not think there is a need for you to be overly anxious on my behalf. With relief, Rose saw that Lord Dunbar finally looked appeased, and allowed the subject to drop. They rode around the park in companionable silence, breaking it periodically to make various innocuous comments about the weather or the people they encountered. Finally, as they neared the gateway that they had entered, Rose finally spoke. This has been lovely, my lord. Thank you so much for inviting me for a drive, but I do believe I ought to be returning home. Wesley blushed slightly. I guess I should not monopolize any more of your time. Rose laughed with glee. You, my lord, are the most entertaining gentleman I've met. You endeavour to appear so manly and unconcerned, but deep inside you are the sweetest man around. Wesley's blush deepened, and he pulled a face at her. I beg of you to keep your voice down, or you shall leave my reputation in tatters. He quickly spoiled the effect by grinning at her, which she swiftly returned. Shall we see you tonight at the Rotherham's ball? Wesley changed the subject by inquiring politely. Are you wanting to watch over me to ensure my safety? Rose teased. When he merely shook his head at her, she continued. I am uncertain about my plans for the evening at this point, my lord. I had been planning to attend, but now it depends on my father's actions. I am most eager to know what has been decided. If you do make it to the Rotherhams, would you save a dance for me? Lord Dunbar asked politely. Rose now looked at the Viscount searchingly. Are you trying to turn me up sweet, my lord? Wesley again barked out a laugh he could not contain. I am merely trying to ensure we have an opportunity for conversation this evening. If you cannot speak to Rantham yourself, you could pass a message to him through me. Rose felt the heat rising in her cheeks, and she stammered out a reply. My apologies, my lord. I did not mean to be so forward. Wesley grinned at his companion. Absolutely no apologies required, my dear girl. I suspect we are of the same mind that we need to ensure this matter is taken care of before we can concentrate on other things. I know this has been more your and Rentham's situation, but I feel tied up in it too, since I know about it. He paused for a moment as he steered his team around a crowded section of street. Rose was unsure how to read his expression when he looked back at her. "Mayhap, when this is all said and done, I shall call upon you again." Rose was undecided how she felt about the possibility of the Viscount calling upon her, so she made light of his comments. "And mayhap I shall be at home to visitors when you call, my lord." The Viscount chuckled deeply. "Now you are the one who is a complete hand, Miss Rosamond Smythe." Rose grinned as they neared her home. "You are a good friend, my lord." Wesley smiled ironically. "That I am, miss. Thank you for noticing." Rose couldn't help the girlish giggle that escaped her lips just before he handed her down in front of the Smythe townhouse. "Thank you, my lord, truly. I had a lovely afternoon, and it helped pass the time so I did not lose my mind completely while I waited for news from my father." Rose looked toward her front door and then back up at the Viscount. "I promise I shall do my best to share that dance with you tonight." Wesley squeezed her hand before letting her go. Rose was glad he did not bother to comment. What is there left to say? She asked herself ironically. Lifting her skirts, Rose dashed up the stairs, eager to see if her father had any news to share with her.